Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Investia Financial Modeling Competition webinar. My name is Nyambura Gumba. I am the marketing lead at Investia. We're very excited to be hosting you all. I do hope that you will have a lot of good information from this session. I hope you've been able to go over the rules of the room. Please ensure that you're on mute. If you have any questions during the session, please do feel free to put them in the chat box at any time, and we'll use those questions at the end of the session. And now I will proceed by giving you an introduction to Investia in case you haven't heard of us before or this is your first time interacting with us. So Investia is a project and corporate finance advisory firm. We deal largely in financial modeling is our key strength. We have done work in SMEs pertaining to valuation, due diligence, assignments, and as a result of this also dabble in capital raising. And so this has been across the range for projects such as renewable energy projects, for real estate. We also do financial modeling, as I mentioned, and we train. And out of that training is what we bore this competition. Recently, we've gone into public sector modeling, and this is advising governments on best practice. At the moment, we've worked together with the government of Zambia around the mining regime, as well as with the government of Kenya. Now, this is just a snapshot of some of the clients that we have worked with. As you can see, there's a good representation in energy and power, and I hope there's some brands that you're recognizing here. I should mention that we're also a member of the Private Financing Advisory Network, which looks at investing in climate-driven clean energy projects. We also are members of the East Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, and we're glad to lend our support to various organizations, as you can see. Now, allow me to introduce the competition. It has been running for 4 years, and this is our 5th year. We're really excited to be launching in the 5th year. We launched the sessions around 2 months ago. Throughout August and September, we've been having webinars, and we're really excited this year. Even though COVID has made it that we cannot participate in your campuses, we're able to reach more universities and more students across Africa. At the moment, in the past, we had only been in 12 universities based in Nairobi, even though we did have some participants join the competition from Mombasa and from Maseno as well. We have seen over 2,000 students trained, and based on what we have seen in terms of you guys joining the platform, we're really excited to be growing that number this year. And this competition, we feel, is our way of ensuring that we're developing the pool of talent in the finance space. And we've been working with several partners on this. EAVCA, which I mentioned that we are a member of. A couple of you will remember that Andy was our partner, giving skills as far as soft skills to the students. We also have had Duma and Edge do additional training on how to prepare for the workplace. Some of our top students have placed in organizations such as Open Oil, KPMG. We also have someone at Horizons. So we're really excited to continue to grow our partner base. And allow me to talk about this year. We're really excited to be having the Fast Standard organization sponsoring. And this is the body that is in charge of promotion of standards in financial modeling. Incidentally, we will be hosting the executive director of the Fast Standard organization next week. So we're really thrilled about that. And please pencil in the date. for yourselves. We have F1, F9, which if you use Excel often, you would know what the shortcut means. But that is a financial modeling house based out of the United Kingdom, and we're also very pleased to have them on board. EAVCA has been our partner over 3 years, and we're very excited to have them this year as well. They will be sharing the profiles of the top students with their membership. And last but not least, we have Acorn under their flagship Acorn Investment Management. And we're very excited to be hosting a team member from there today, which we will get into in a few moments. But before we do, here are the key things that you need to note for the competition. The competition will be running from the 26th of October to the 30th of October. We will have a case study available on our learning platform, which is learn.investia.com. And all you will need to do is download that case study and build your financial model and submit that for our analysts to review. Now, I should mention that this is at no cost to you at all. And we are looking forward to looking at your models and seeing how you develop them. Now, if you've never heard of financial modeling in the past, you would be able to have every tool that you need if you go through the webinar sessions that we've gone over, especially last week's session with Kevin. Additionally, we have the free course on the learning platform. So if you go over that, it's about 4 hours of content, practice, you should be able to find this case study a cinch. So we're excited about that. And every person who submits a model, of course, without plagiarism, will be receiving a certificate of participation. F1, F9 will be sharing access to some of their courses with the top students. The Fast Standard organization is going to be paying for certification tests for the top 10 students. And as you know, this is a very key thing to have when you're going into the job market. And last but not least, again, Acorn will be giving the top student an internship under the Acorn Investment Managers. So you'll hear a little bit more about the expectations and what that role will entail with our discussion with Raghav. So these are some of the universities that have participated in the past, and this is not all of them actually. So we're really excited to have some representation. And actually, I saw someone representing UN, or as I hear, the University of Nairobi. And I've seen some people also from KCA, so thank you for joining the session. I hope you will also spread the word. And lastly, I'll just show you a couple of pictures. I'm sure you see some of your trainers. There's some people here as well that you know. I can point out one of our top students from University of Nairobi, who is Valentine, who has joined Investia since his stint with the competition, and we're very pleased to have him on board. You can learn more about his story on our website, read the blogs, and see what the experience has been like for him. Now, with that brief introduction, I would like to invite our guest for today. We're hosting Raghav Gandhi, who is the REITS Implementation Specialist at Acorn Investment Managers. Welcome, Raghav.
Hi, Nambura. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us a little bit more about Acorn.
Sure. So Acorn is Acorn's vision is to be the leading provider of rental housing in not just East Africa, but hopefully across Africa over the long term. It has its initial focus, and what we have been focused on for the past 5 years is to be the leading provider of purpose-built student accommodation. So I'm sure a number of the folks who are going to be listening in will be familiar with our first brand, which is called Kwetu. And we have a number of, we have 4 properties that are currently operational that offer about 2,300 beds. But student accommodation is just the start of things. We hope to have a much broader product range over time. So, at some point we will move into, let's say, young professional housing. So folks such as yourselves can also choose to live at, one of our properties, and then eventually for, young couples or early families, we might have starter homes as well. So we feel that there's a huge scope for of demand and market opportunity for what we want to do, and we believe in the business model centered around rental housing, which is what our focus is.
That's great to hear. So how has COVID affected real estate or investing as well in real estate? And maybe are there any lessons that you can share with us based on what you've seen?
So I think COVID's impact, it depends on the asset class, and I don't think you can really paint it with a broad brush, with one single brush. If and I'm sure many of you would be aware, like for instance, retail or hospitality has suffered, right? Which is kind of for obvious reasons, because people are not going out that much, so they're not shopping, or with travel being severely restricted, even till now, even though things have slowly started opening up, folks are holding back, right? Nobody's necessarily fully comfortable with getting on a plane or living in a hotel. So so in that sense, real estate has been impacted, has been hit by the onslaught of coronavirus. What we found is, in the case of purpose-built student accommodation or rental housing as a whole, funnily enough, what COVID has, or maybe it's not funny, but given the unfortunate circumstances, but what we found is that COVID has highlighted an inbuilt resiliency to rental housing and the defensive nature, because ultimately it makes sense, right? People still have to live somewhere. You can't just be, COVID happened, so it's not like you're going to go out on the street. So what it's pointed to is that, what globally you're seeing with rental housing, and what we've maybe had to do to some extent is, looking at deferring payments or offering discounted rates. But what it's also highlighted is that because people still want to live somewhere or need to live somewhere, we still are maintaining I think a fairly impressive level of occupancy given the circumstances, which we're very happy with.
That's great to hear. So in terms of investing and picking your portfolio going forward, do you think there's any things that lessons maybe from this, maybe focusing more on retail, like you're saying, because it is pretty resilient? What do you think about picking up portfolio post-COVID?
Sorry, could you repeat that? You got cut up a bit.
Sorry about that. I was talking about investing in real estate in a post-COVID world. You talk about how retail is pretty resilient. Does that mean that, what would you advise people? Is there a lesson to be drawn from that, perhaps?
So just to clarify, I don't think retail is resilient at all. I said rental housing is resilient. I actually don't think anyone should invest in retail with the kind of shift more and more into online shopping, and just kind of any purchases of goods and services on an online basis. I think retail real estate has a very short lifespan, or a difficult lifespan, I would say. If anything, it's as a result of that difficulty. If you're looking at real estate, I think industrial real estate has much more stronger fundamentals, because when you've got entities such as like a Jumia or Glovo, they all require storage space. That's essentially what they require, and so therefore that's where I see some fundamental drivers. I think there's always this thing, like people think that you can time the market, and with real estate, and to your question that, oh well, if things are down right now, then maybe this is the right time to go in. I'm not sure it's as straightforward as that. I think you have to look at kind of market fundamentals. You have to see what are the key drivers of any of any economy and of any sector within that economy. So for instance, if someone was to ask me in Kenya, and I've only been here for whatever it is, like 7 months, someone was to ask me, oh, if residential real estate values have fallen, right? Should we buy an apartment? I don't think one should, right? Unless you're looking at it from, hey, look, I'm just going to live in it myself. It's my own consumption, right? So I always feel that sometimes people get confused with what real estate should be. Real estate can be looked at in two ways. One is as a consumption item, like essentially drinking a can of Coke, right? Instead, you're living in your space and that's your space. Or you look at it from an investment perspective. I don't think one should confuse the two. So if you're thinking that, hey, let me look at buying an apartment because I'm going to live in it myself and values are cheap and I think it makes sense vis-a-vis what I would be paying for rent, okay, I can see that. But if someone to me is going to say, look, values are down, I want to buy real estate so I can sell it at a higher value 5 years from now, I'm not so sure I would get into that. But that's probably a wider conversation.
Right. So you've talked a bit about making decisions, and I guess that kind of brings me into financial modeling, because we're always telling people, like building a model will help you make the right decisions, or at least bring you close to a decision, whether it's from the investment perspective, like you're talking about, like buy an apartment or not, invest in industrial real estate or not. So where do you see the importance of financial modeling in this kind of decision making?
Well, for us, I mean, for real estate, it's exceptionally important. It's I mean, one can argue it's the starting point. When we start evaluating, let's say, either land opportunities or buildings to acquire, to me, you have to do kind of the financial analysis before you then get into the other elements of due diligence. If the financial analysis doesn't make sense, if it doesn't hit your return hurdles, then that's just a non-starter in itself. Why do all the other work that is required, which can be quite extensive for acquiring any form of real estate, if you don't think you're going to earn the returns? So we actually, I mean, we use models extensively, not just for evaluating whether we buy land parcels or buildings, but also, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, we're right now in the process of forming and launching 2 REITs, real estate investment trusts. So the fantastic team that we have out here, they've built like a super expansive REIT model just to show what the returns are for investors as well. So it's not just kind of from a perspective of evaluating opportunities, but it's also from the perspective of showing what returns investors earn as a result of being part of our REITs. So we've got a whole suite of models that we work with, which we're quite proud of.
Great. And actually, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the REITs? And I know that's where the student who wins the top prize, I think, would be working closely with that team. So please do share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is quite an exciting initiative at our end. As I mentioned before, we are focused on rental housing. Rental housing, for any provider of rental housing to be successful, they need scale. How do you get scale? You get scale through capital, so you need access to capital. And so how do you get access to capital? By providing a forum or a vehicle for investors to come into, which makes sense. And globally, what you see is that REITs, which stands for Real Estate Investment Trusts, are the most optimal structure for delivering and managing real estate centered around rental income. Okay, REITs don't work if your business model is around selling apartments or selling houses, but if you intend to own the real estate and then lease it out for rental income, then REITs make a lot of sense. But because REITs because of regulations, have inbuilt expenses that one has to manage, the larger your asset base, the more you're able to spread out the costs. So for us, REITs have a number of advantages aside from what I just mentioned, including tax leakage. So they're very tax efficient structures. They're regulated. They provide transparency to investors, and real estate can be a little murky. It's globally known as one of the kind of murkier industries that one can be in. So if you can offer investors the opportunity to invest in real estate through a transparent ecosystem, then to me that makes a lot of sense. And so what we're doing is we're launching two REITs. One REIT will be responsible for the development of our projects, and the other will, once the projects are developed, will acquire the project and then manage it from a property management perspective. And yeah, it's going to be I think very big. We're targeting launching by the end of this year. There's a lot of work that's happened with the team internally, and we're very excited. Currently, you might have even seen in the news, although no one was meant to see it in the news, but these things happen. We've started meeting investors, and we've received very positive feedback. But we've been very encouraged by what they have to say. So onwards and upwards.
That's great, and it sounds like a great opportunity as well. So for the student that works the hardest, I imagine this would be a really good part to be be a part of this shift in the real estate market. And now, speaking of students, maybe I should ask you, what did you study in the university, and maybe how different is what you're doing now? I mean, like this, you're talking about REITs. Is this what you always intended to do? Did you have like a clear plan?
I don't even know what I'm doing right now, let alone whether I knew it 20 years ago. No, I studied economics. So that's what I studied in university. I think what I remember from my course, it was something about two lines which said supply and demand, and that was pretty much it. But in all seriousness, no, I think with respect to university education and studying something like economics, I don't think it's necessary that you have to be able to apply exactly what you study. And I generally apply that to, academia. I don't think it's necessarily relevant to what you do in life thereafter. I think, but it's more about just imbibing some of the kind of analytical skills, kind of the elements of rigor that it introduces you to. That's what maybe if anything I've taken on, and just I think over time you also appreciate some of the stuff that you studied, which maybe you didn't realize at that time. So now I understand. When I'm talking about why rental housing to me makes sense, now I can relay that to some of the stuff that I learned, and think about, oh yeah, that now it's all piecing together. Why it's a clear opportunity for us because there's a demand supply gap, right? But you don't think of those things when you're there. You only realize them afterwards.
True. You have mentioned one piece of advice, I guess, that you don't have to follow the exact path. But what other advice have you maybe relied on or has impacted you over your career journey that maybe you can share with the students today?
Yeah, good question. So I would say, so I'll give you a few pointers. Some parents don't like some of the stuff that I say, but that's fine. I'm sure parents aren't on listening to me. My parents don't listen to me, so why should other parents listen? So I'm kind of just extending what you said. I think I generally tell any student or kind of a young professional that it's not so important to know exactly what it is that you want to do right from the get-go. I mean, if you know it, that's great. I started my career in investment banking. I realized very soon that was something that I was never going to do, right, for the long term. And that in itself is not a bad thing to go through because it helps you realize what it is that you don't want to do. So you know that you have to look for something else, right? But I think even in places where you don't want to be, I think it's very critical to maximize that opportunity and learn whatever you can from that specific period in time, that specific place that you're at. I think it's always good to maximize the potential and just be constantly learning, just feeding your brain with as much knowledge as possible. Because yes, it might not be an industry or a company that you want to work in long term, but the likelihood is there will be something that you learn from it that you can take on for, kind of a future career. Okay, and I think that's very important. So, and then the next piece of advice is that even if you don't know what you want to do, I think it's always better to be headed in a certain direction. So you're not completely roaming around like a headless chicken going from one job to another, which is completely different, and you're like, okay, I still don't know. I think it's good to have some general sense of purpose, and along the way, you will figure things out. I'm very much a believer in everything works out for the best. And then the last thing I would say is find your passion. I think that's extremely important as well. I think, I really like real estate. It's the only thing I've really ever got. I've now been a real estate professional for too long. Whatever it is. I don't want to make myself sound older than I am. So, and I enjoy learning about different aspects of real estate, and whether it's learning about different products, like different types of real estate, or learning about, sometime about, let's say, investments, another time about property management, another time about development and construction, how contractors work, all that. I think if you can find your passion, if you can, and it doesn't have to be industry specific, it can be like a role specific. So maybe you're just like, I'm really passionate about accounting, right? There can be someone like that. I don't know who, but there can be someone like that. And once you find that passion, you got to go at it. You got to just make sure that, you make the most of that opportunity, because there are a lot of people who don't like their jobs, and that's a very sad thing, right? One needs to enjoy life, and it's important that you do something that you really enjoy.
Yeah, that's some great advice, and more than we even bargained for. So and maybe in line with that, you talk about how learning is important, and I guess some of how we do that is through experience, yes, but also through books. And I don't mean just like the accounting books that or the economics, the books that you have the text in school. So in your case, if you had only one book that you could recommend to people to read, which would it be, and why?
Okay. But if I have to recommend a book, I don't think it's going to be a textbook. That's for sure. I mean, I was never a good student, so I usually keep textbooks for reasons beyond what they should be used for. But I like fiction, because I'm a bit of an kind of escapist. So my two favorite books, one is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I think it's just a brilliant piece of satire that, I think it's just an incredible book, and it's also very relevant actually for times like these, as well, when you see the kind of political scenario that is there globally. And then the second book is, again, because I like imagination and creativity and stuff, I like, and it's also, is kind of derived or related to a significant chapter in India's history, is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. So those are my two go-to books.
Nice. I'm assuming those would be the ones you would go to an island with if you had to be exiled. Those would be the two that would keep you company.
Yeah, not sure why you're exiling me, but sure. Yeah, okay, I'll go with that. Yeah, those would be the two books I'd go with. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So we're gonna open up to questions now. So I see that there's no questions in the chat as yet. So please, if you have any question, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, and then we can address them. Maybe as we wait for some questions, if there are any. We did talk about financial modeling, and I know we've trained some of the guys at Acorn, and we use a standard, like we use the FAST standard actually, to be specific. What do you feel is the importance of standards in financial modeling?
I think, I mean, look, I haven't come across standards as such. But I think, of course, uh, I think it would be extremely important actually, because, I learned from my investment banking days, they used to teach us that modeling is not a science, it's an art. And but so that is true to some extent. I some of the team members out here, I do consider them artists given the work that I've seen, and if that's thanks to you, so thank you for that. Given the kind of modeling skills that they have, but the sometimes I think what also tends to happen is you take it too far. So with art comes poetic license, and if that means that you can go ahead and do some wildly assumptive moves in a model, that can obviously be misleading for whoever the stakeholders are. And if you're able to avoid any scope for misleading by introducing standards like you have in accounting, like you have in valuations, then I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's actually would be a great thing.
Yeah. And in our experience, I think it's also important, like when someone else has to look at your model and maybe play around with it, it's important that they're able to figure out, like you're saying, they're not trying to paint over your masterpiece.
Yeah.
But every brush stroke, I guess, would make sense in the end. I still see that there's no questions. It must mean that you communicated very effectively and clearly.
Or they've just gone to sleep. They're just bored. They're like, who's this guy?
I hope that's not the case. I trust that's not the case. So for the internship, do you have any more details on what the students can expect?
Yeah, actually, we didn't cover that at all. I think that's a great question. I think I personally believe that this has the scope of being a fantastic internship opportunity. I think there's, like I said, it's a kind of a very new initiative, not just for Acorn, but generally across the market. There's only one REIT in the Kenya capital markets right now, and we've got very different aspirations. We're trying to do things very differently. You're going to work. Whoever joins is going to get the opportunity to work with, I think, a great team. You'll get exposure to a lot of learning from the real estate space, and we like to have fun as well along the way. So it is about work hard, play hard, I will say they're like the folks who do the modeling for us. They're the asset managers. So we've got two asset managers, and the intern will be part of the asset management team. I think there's the scope to learn a lot from the two of them. They're fantastic professionals, and I think that's something that I think the intern would benefit greatly from.
Great. I think you've covered a bit of this question that's been asked, but maybe you can expound a little. How's the REITs market in Kenya in terms of the development stage?
Yeah, so it's there's only one REIT till now that's operational. So despite the fact that the regulations, I think, were announced or introduced to the capital markets more than 5 years ago, it's been a bit slow on the uptake. Unfortunately, that REIT hasn't performed that well. There was another REIT that tried to launch that was focused on the development space, and unfortunately, they were unable to launch. So it's still in its infancy. It's still immature. It's still got a lot to prove. But like I said, I think we have certain differentiators, both from kind of like the company itself, the asset that we're dealing with, not only just the sector, but in terms of the asset quality that we have, that I think should help us kind of be a little cut above the rest. The rest aren't that many, but that's fine. But nevertheless, we've been working with a number of international consultants as well, just to ensure that our ecosystem that we're creating around these REITs is going to stand up to global best practices. So there's been a lot of capital invested and a lot of time and effort to ensure that these are going to be great launches.
Yeah, and I think that's also what makes this opportunity for the students so exciting, because you're getting in right in the early stages. So
yeah, and if the person who joins performs, who knows, if they enjoyed their internship, of course, and I think that's always important. It could lead to a full-time opportunity as well, because the requirement is not something that we've created for the competition. It's because the requirement is there that and we thought it would be a good avenue to try and find talent, and given also your let's say exposure, expertise in this whole field of financial modeling, we thought partnering with Investia was a good idea.
yeah, that's great to hear. So there's no other questions. It seems like I've given quite a bit of time. But in case of anything, remember we're available, so you can continue to send us your questions, whether about the internship, about the competition itself, and we'd be happy to address those. And so at this point, I'd really like to say thank you to Raghav. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And I do hope that the students were able to get quite a bit of information. There's lots of gems that you've shared with us all, actually relevant not only to students. I think there's a couple of those I'll keep for myself as well.
Well, thanks, Nimura. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and we look forward to the competition taking place. We're looking forward to welcoming the intern. There's like I said, there's a lot to be done. So the sooner they can come on board, the better it is.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great to hear. So thank you everybody for your time, and we look forward to hosting you next week. Again, we'll be having the executive director of the Fast Standard organization, the founder also, and writer, author, co-author actually, of the Fast Standard. So please do join us then as well, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.